The first time Damaris Olwen saw the white-haired man standing at the garden gate, she thought he might be a ghost. He appeared on a Thursday evening in late September, when the last of the summer roses had begun to drop their petals onto the stone walkways she swept each night. The garden belonged to someone she had never met, a patron who paid her generously through a lawyer's office to tend the flowers and herbs that grew within the high stone walls. The work was peaceful, solitary, and exactly what she needed after the chaos of her previous life. She had been a nurse once, burned out and hollow, until she walked away and found this strange job listing. Wanted, gardener for private estate, night hours only. Discretion essential. Most people would have found the requirements odd. Damaris found them perfect. The man at the gate was tall and still as marble. His hair fell past his shoulders, pure white, despite a face that looked no older than 30. His skin held the same colorless quality, luminous in the moonlight. He wore a dark coat that might have been tailored in another century, and when his eyes met hers across the garden path, she felt the impact like a hand pressed to her sternum. "Good evening," he said. His voice carried the weight of old stone and deeper earth. Damaris gripped her pruning shears a little tighter. She had learned caution in her years working emergency rooms, learned to read danger in a person's stance and eyes. But what she saw in this man was not the threat of violence. It was something else entirely, something that made her heart beat faster for reasons she could not name. "Good evening," she replied. "Can I help you?" "I doubt it." A slight curve touched his mouth, not quite a smile. "I'm the one who hired you, Miss Olwen. I wanted to see how the garden fared under your care." She glanced around at the rows of lavender, the climbing roses, the herb beds she had weeded and mulched. "You're welcome to look, though I'm surprised you've never come before. I've been working here for 3 months. "I have come before," he said quietly. "You simply did not see me." The words should have frightened her. Instead, she felt a strange flutter of warmth beneath her ribs. She had been watched, yes, but she had never felt unsafe here. The garden had become her sanctuary, and if he had been observing her all this time without making her afraid, perhaps that meant something. "What's your name?" she asked. He tilted his head, and she caught the gleam of something ancient in his pale eyes. "Zayden Vorodin. And I know yours already, Damaris. I read your application quite thoroughly." "That seems unfair. You know more about me than I know about you." "Then ask," he said. "I will answer what I can." She should have asked practical things. Why he only wanted the garden tended at night, why he paid twice the going rate, why he dressed like something out of a period drama. Instead, she heard herself say, "Why do you stay out there? The gate's not locked." For a long moment, he did not answer. Then, "Because I was not invited in, and I have learned the value of waiting for invitations." There was a story in those words, heavy and sad. Damaris found herself walking toward the gate, toward him, her shears dangling forgotten in her hand. "You're invited now, if you want to see what I've done with the roses." Zayden Vorodin did not move. "Are you certain?" "It's your garden." "It is, but you have made it yours as well. I would not intrude without your permission." Something in her chest cracked open, just a little. In her 32 years, Damaris had been interrupted, spoken over, pushed aside, and taken for granted more times than she could count. She had learned to fight for space, for respect, for the simple courtesy of being asked instead of assumed. And here was this strange, beautiful man treating a garden gate like a sacred threshold. "I'm certain," she said. "Come in." He opened the gate so carefully it barely whispered on its hinges. When he stepped through, she noticed he moved with a grace that seemed almost inhuman, each step deliberate and quiet. He walked past her to the roses she had trained up the south wall, and he stood there for a long time, just looking. "My mother planted the first of these," he said finally, 3 centuries ago. Damaris laughed before she could stop herself. 3 centuries, right. He turned to face her, and his expression held no humor at all. "I am not what you think I am, Damaris, but I am not a liar either." "Then what are you?" "A king without a kingdom. A monster trying to be less monstrous, a man who has lived too long and seen too much." He moved closer, and she held her ground, even as her pulse jumped. "And someone who has been watching you bring life back to a place I thought was dead, wondering if perhaps there is hope for dead things after all." "You're not dead," she said. You're standing right here. There are many ways to die without stopping. His eyes searched her face. You know that. I can see it in you. You came here because something died in you too, and you needed space to remember how to grow again. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to laugh it off or walk away. Instead, she found herself nodding. I was tired. So tired I couldn't remember why I'd wanted to help people in the first place. So I stopped. And have you remembered? Sometimes. When I see a rosebud open. When I find new growth on something I thought was beyond saving. She looked up at him. What are you trying to remember? How to be gentle, Zayden said softly. How to want without taking. How to ask. They stood in the garden as the moon rose higher, and Damaris felt the earth turn beneath her feet. She did not understand what he was, not really, but she understood the exhaustion in his voice. She understood trying to come back from the edge of something terrible. You can come whenever you want, she said. To the garden, I mean. You don't have to wait at the gate. Thank you. He inclined his head, a gesture that belonged to another age. But I think I will continue to wait, until you grow accustomed to me. I am not an easy thing to grow accustomed to. He left soon after, disappearing through the gate and into the shadows beyond the wall. Damaris stood among her flowers and wondered what had just happened. She wondered what he had meant about 3 centuries, about kingdoms and monsters. She wondered why his sadness had resonated in her bones like a struck bell. She did not wonder whether she would see him again. Somehow, she already knew she would. Zayden came to the garden every night after that. At first, he stayed for only a few minutes, asking about her work or commenting on the changes she had made. He spoke of plants with the knowledge of someone who had seen species evolve, who remembered flowers that no longer existed. He told her about gardens in places she had never heard of, describing them with such vivid detail that she could almost smell the foreign blooms. Slowly, his visits lengthened. He began to help her, though his help was strange. He could work for hours without tiring, moving heavy stones she would have needed a wheelbarrow for. His hands were cold when they accidentally brushed hers, cold enough that she gasped the first time. I should have warned you, he said, drawing back immediately. I'm not warm. It's all right, she flexed her fingers, chasing away the chill. Why, though? Because I do not have what you have, no heartbeat, no breath unless I choose to take one, no blood of my own moving through my veins. He watched her face carefully. Are you afraid now? Damaris considered. She should be. She understood what he was telling her, even if he had not said the word directly. But fear seemed like the wrong response to someone who asked permission to enter a garden, who apologized for being cold, who spoke of gentleness like a language he was trying to learn. No, she said. Should I be? Most would say yes. But you're not most, are you, Damaris Olwen? I suppose not. As October arrived and the air grew crisp, Zayden told her more. He told her about the world beneath the world, the courts and councils of creatures who walked at night. He spoke of himself with brutal honesty, a vampire king who had ruled for 800 years, who had commanded armies and judged disputes and done things that weighed on him like stones. Why did you leave? She asked one night as they planted bulbs for spring flowers he would see bloom, but she suspected he could not enjoy in daylight. I did not leave. I was exiled. His hands moved through the soil with practiced ease. By my own choice, which I suppose is not exile at all. I stepped down. I gave my crown to another and came here to this house, to this garden. I told them I would return when I had learned what I needed to learn. What do you need to learn? How to be worthy of the power I once held. He sat back on his heels, his white hair spilling over his shoulders. I hurt someone once, Damaris. Someone I claimed to love. I used my power to keep her, to bind her to me, and I called it love because I did not know the difference. By the time I understood what I had done, it was too late. She was destroyed, and I was the one who destroyed her. The pain in his voice made Damaris's throat tight. What happened to her? She walked into the sunrise. It is how our kind ends, when we can bear no more. He looked up at the moon, and his face was stark with old grief. I found her ashes on the eastern balcony. She left me a letter explaining what I had taken from her, how she had not chosen me at all, how my power had overwhelmed her will, until she could not remember who she was without me. She wrote that she forgave me because she did not believe I had understood what I was doing. But I cannot forgive myself. Damaris sat beside him in the dirt, her hands dusty with soil. How long ago? 80 years. 80 years of understanding that everything I thought was love was possession, that I had never once asked her what she truly wanted. I took the throne through force. I took lovers the same way. I never asked because I never thought I needed to. Kings do not ask. Vampires do not ask. We are predators, and predators take. He turned to her, and his eyes were fierce. But I do not want to be a predator anymore. I want to be someone who knows the difference between desire and consent, between wanting and taking. I want to ask, even when it terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because if I ask, you might say no. And if you say no, I have to accept it. I have to accept that I cannot have everything I want simply because I want it. That is a lesson I have spent 8 decades learning, and I am still not certain I have learned it well enough. Damaris understood then why he waited at the gate, why he asked before entering, before touching, before speaking sometimes. He was teaching himself a new language, and she was his practice, though she did not think he saw it that way. She thought perhaps she was also his test, the person who would show him whether he had truly changed. "You can ask me things," she said quietly. "I promise I'll tell you if the answer is no. That's a dangerous promise to make to someone like me." "I don't think it is. I think you'd set yourself on fire before you'd cross a line I drew." Zayden looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes, I would. Does that comfort you or disturb you?" "A little of both." He laughed, and the sound was rusty, as though he had not used it in a long time. "You're honest. I have missed honesty." They planted the rest of the bulbs in companionable silence. When they finished, Damaris realized it was nearly dawn. She could see the faintest lightning in the eastern sky, and Zayden noticed it at the same moment. He stood quickly, urgency in his movements for the first time since she had met him. "I must go, the sun." "I know." She stood too, brushing dirt from her knees. "Will I see you tomorrow night?" "Do you want to?" It was such a simple question, but it held such weight. Damaris thought about her small apartment, her quiet life, the careful walls she had built around herself after burning out so completely. She thought about how those walls had not felt like protection when Zayden was around. They felt like a cage. Yes," she said. "I want to." She watched him leave, slipping away into the pre-dawn shadows like a ghost returning to its haunting. Then she locked the garden gate and went home, her mind full of white hair and ancient eyes and the terrible courage it took to ask for things when you had spent centuries taking them. November brought frost and shorter days. Zayden's visits grew longer because the nights stretched wider, and Damaris found herself hurrying through her other evening tasks so she could get to the garden sooner. They talked about everything, her childhood in a small coastal town, his centuries of memory, the way the world had changed and stayed the same. He told her about vampire politics, the intricate courts and blood laws that governed his kind. She told him about the patient who had died in her arms, the breaking point that had sent her running from medicine. "You carry that death with you," Zayden observed one evening. They were sitting on a stone bench near the fountain, watching the water catch moonlight. "You blame yourself." "I was tired. I missed something I should have caught." And he died. Damaris wrapped her arms around herself. "Everyone told me it wasn't my fault, that I did everything right. But I keep thinking if I had been sharper, more focused, you would have saved him, perhaps. Or perhaps he would have died regardless, and you would have found another reason to blame yourself." Zayden's voice was gentle. "We who have seen death up close, we always wonder if we could have prevented it. But death comes regardless. The only question is whether we let it consume us afterward." "Did you? You let it consume you?" "For a very long time, yes. I walked through decades like a ghost myself, going through the motions of rule without truly being present. It was easier than facing what I had done. But eventually, I realized that hiding from my guilt was another way of being a coward. So I stepped down, came here, and tried to learn how to live with it." He looked at her. "You cannot run from what happened, Damaris, but you can decide what it teaches you. Does it teach you that you are inadequate? Or does it teach you that you are human, fallible, and still worthy of grace?" Tears pricked at her eyes. "When did you become so wise?" Wisdom is just accumulated mistakes, examined honestly. I have made many mistakes. I am trying very hard to examine them honestly. She leaned her head against his shoulder without thinking, and then froze, uncertain if the gesture was welcome. But Zayden went very still in a different way, a surprised way, and after a moment she felt him carefully, tentatively, rest his cheek against her hair. "Is this all right?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes. Is it all right for you?" "It is more than all right. It is everything." They sat that way until the moon set, neither of them willing to move, both of them afraid to break the fragile, precious thing growing between them. By December, Damaris had to admit she was falling in love. It was not a sudden tumble but a slow descent, like sinking into deep water. She noticed the way Zayden listened when she spoke, how he remembered everything she said. She noticed how he asked permission for the smallest things. "May I move this pot? May I walk with you to the gate? May I tell you something that might be too heavy for a conversation this light?" She loved his courtliness, but more than that, she loved the raw effort behind it. He was not naturally gentle. She could see the predator in him sometimes, the king who had commanded and conquered. But he chose gentleness anyway, chose it deliberately, and that choice was more attractive than any easy charm could have been. She wondered if he felt the same. He looked at her sometimes with such intensity that she felt transparent, as though he could see through skin and bone to the truth of her. But he never said anything. He never pushed, never assumed, never took a single step beyond what she invited. It was maddening. It was wonderful. It was exactly what she needed, and also the most frustrating thing she had ever experienced. One night in mid-December, she found him standing at the garden gate when she arrived, and his face was troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, unlocking the gate to let them both in. "I received a summons today. The Vampire Council wants to see me. They are considering ending my exile." Damaris's heart leapt. "That's good news, isn't it?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps they have decided I am unfit to ever return." He walked deeper into the garden, agitation in his movements. "I stepped down to learn how to be better. But I do not know if I have learned enough. I do not know if I can return to power without becoming what I was." "You won't," Damaris said firmly. "You're not the same person who left." "How can you be certain?" "Because the person who left would never have asked that question." He stopped walking and turned to face her. Snow had begun to fall, light flakes drifting down to catch in his white hair and on his dark coat. He looked like something out of a fairy tale, beautiful and impossible. "I do not want to leave this garden," he said quietly. "I do not want to leave you." Her breath caught. "Zayden, I must tell you something, and you must know you can refuse to hear it. You can walk away, and I will not follow. You can tell me to never speak of it, and I will obey. But I have spent 3 months learning to ask, and I think I have earned the right to ask you this." He took a step closer. "May I tell you that I love you? May I say the words, even knowing they might not be welcome?" Damaris felt tears on her cheeks, warm against the winter air. "You can tell me." "I love you," Zayden said, and his voice shook. "I love your kindness and your strength. I love the way you bring life to dead things. I love your honesty, your courage, the way you see me as I am and do not flinch. I love that you let me learn how to be gentle with you, that you have been patient with my learning. I love you, and I am terrified because I do not trust myself with love. The last time I loved, I destroyed, and I would rather walk into the sun than hurt you the way I hurt her." "You won't hurt me," Damaris said. She closed the distance between them, standing so close she could see the silver flecks in his pale eyes. "You won't, because you'll ask first, because you've learned the difference." "Have I?" His hands hovered near her face, not quite touching. "Or am I simply better at hiding what I am?" "You're not hiding anything. You've shown me exactly who you are, including the parts you're ashamed of. That's not hiding, Zayden. That's courage." She reached up and took his cold hands in hers. "I love you too. I've been falling in love with you since the first night you asked permission to enter the garden. No one has ever treated me the way you do, like my yes and no matter more than anything else." "They do matter more than anything else," he said fiercely. "Your will. Your choice, they are sacred to me. I will never, I know, I trust you. He closed his eyes as though the words had wounded him. I do not deserve that trust. Maybe not, but you've earned it anyway. They stood in the falling snow, hands clasped, and Damaris felt the world narrow to just the two of them. She could see he wanted to kiss her. She could see it in the way he looked at her mouth, in the tension in his shoulders. But he did not move. He held himself back, waiting, and she loved him even more for it. The council meeting is tomorrow night, he said finally. I must go. And I do not know what will happen. They may reinstate me. They may banish me permanently. They may find me guilty of my crimes and end me. All of those are possible. Then come back when it's over, Damaris said. Come back and tell me what happened. Come back to me. If I can, I will. That's a promise. He lifted her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture of such old-fashioned reverence that her heart ached. Then he left, and she watched him disappear beyond the gate, into the dark. The next night, Damaris went to the garden as usual, but Zayden did not come. She waited until dawn, sitting on the stone bench and watching the gate. He did not appear. The night after that, the same. And the night after that. By the fourth night, she was frantic with worry. She had no way to contact him, no way to know what had happened. She only knew that he had promised to return if he could, and he had not, and that meant something had gone terribly wrong. She was kneeling in the herb bed, yanking out weeds with shaking hands, when she heard the gate open. She spun around, hope leaping in her chest, but it was not Zayden. The woman who entered the garden was tall and severe, with white hair bound in a tight coronet and eyes like chips of ice. She wore a gown that might have been fashionable 200 years ago, all black velvet and silver embroidery. Two other figures flanked her, equally pale, equally cold. You are the human, the woman said. It was not a question. Damaris stood slowly. Who are you? I am Silviana, High Counselor of the Vampire Courts. These are my associates, Lord Constantine and Lady Mihaela. We have questions for you regarding Zayden Vorodin. Fear spiked through her. Where is he? What have you done with him? He is in custody, pending judgment. You will answer our questions, girl, and you will answer them truthfully. Do you understand? Not until you tell me what's happening. Silviana's expression did not change. Zayden has petitioned to return to the court as king. This is his right, as he abdicated voluntarily. However, questions have arisen regarding his fitness to rule, questions about his past conduct and his reasons for exile. You have spent considerable time with him in recent months. We wish to know what he has told you, what he has revealed about himself. Damaris lifted her chin. He's told me everything. He doesn't hide what he did. Then you know about Catalina Draven, about how he bound her, kept her, drove her to her death. I know what he told me, yes. And yet you welcomed his presence. You spent your nights with him. You allowed him to touch you. Silviana stepped closer, and Damaris fought the urge to step back. Did he use his power on you, child? Did he compel you to feel affection for him, to trust him? No. The word came out sharp and certain. No, he never used any power on me. He never even tried. How can you be certain? Our power is subtle. It works on the mind in ways you would not notice. Because I know what it feels like when someone tries to control me, Damaris said. I've had enough people in my life try to tell me what to think, how to feel, what to do. Zayden never did that. He asked. He always asked. That's the whole point. Lord Constantine spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble. The point, human, is that Zayden Vorodin has a history of taking what he wants and calling it love. We must determine if he is truly changed, or if he has simply found a new victim. I'm not a victim, Damaris said hotly. I chose to spend time with him. I chose to care about him. No one forced me, least of all Zayden. Pretty words. Silviana circled around her slowly, and Damaris felt like prey being assessed. But we have evidence that suggests otherwise. An enemy of Zayden's has come forward with testimony. He claims that Zayden has not changed at all, that his exile was a performance, and that he has already begun to manipulate you the same way he manipulated Catalina. He has called for Zayden's execution, and the council is considering his request. Damaris's blood ran cold. Who? Who is saying this? That is not your concern. What is your concern is this. We need to know the truth. If Zayden has harmed you or coerced you in any way, you must tell us now. This is your chance to be free of him." "I don't want to be free of him," Damaris said. "I love him." "Do you? Or does he want you to love him?" "And so you do?" The question hung in the air. Damaris thought about the past 3 months. She thought about Zayden's careful distance, his constant asking, the way he flinched from his own desire as though it were something dangerous. She thought about his grief for Catalina, his fear of becoming what he had been. She thought about the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and breakable that he did not trust himself to hold. "I love him because of who he is," she said slowly. "I love him because he spent 80 years learning to be gentle, because he treats my choices like they matter, because he would rather suffer than risk hurting me. If he were the same person who hurt Catalina, he would have taken what he wanted from me weeks ago, but he didn't. He hasn't. He won't." "You cannot know that," Lady Mihaela said softly. She had a kind face, and that made her words more terrible. "You cannot know what he will become if we restore his power. Men vampires change when they have authority. The gentleness might be real now while he is humbled, but give him a crown again, and he may remember how to be a king, how to take." Damaris shook her head. "You're wrong. You're wrong because you don't understand what it costs him to ask. It's not easy for him. It's not natural. He has to fight himself every time, fight centuries of instinct and habit. But he does it anyway, because he's decided that's who he wants to be. That's not going to change just because you give him power back. If anything, it'll make him more careful. Or it will make him more dangerous," Silviana said. "We cannot take that risk." "So you're going to kill him? Because he might become a monster again?" Anger flared hot in Damaris's chest. "He's not the same person anymore. How can you not see that? We see a vampire who learned to hide his nature convincingly. We see a predator who has lured in another victim with pretty words and careful performances. And we see that you are too blinded by what you believe is love to recognize the danger you are in." "Then you see wrong," Damaris said, "and you're making a terrible mistake." Silviana regarded her coldly. "Perhaps, or perhaps we are saving your life, and you will thank us when you are free of his influence. Either way, the decision is not yours to make. The council will convene at midnight tomorrow. We will render our judgment then." She swept out of the garden, her companions following. Damaris stood in the silence they left behind, her hands shaking, her mind racing. She had to do something. She had to help Zayden somehow, but she did not know anything about vampire courts or their laws. She did not know how to fight creatures who had lived for centuries. All she knew was that she could not let them kill him for the crime of having changed. She left the garden and went home. She spent the day trying to think of a plan, but everything she came up with seemed useless. What could she do against a council of ancient vampires? How could she prove that Zayden had changed when they had already decided he had not? By the time evening fell, she was no closer to an answer. But she knew she had to try something. She had to at least see him, speak to him, let him know he was not alone. She asked neighbors, searched online, made phone calls. No one knew where the Vampire Council met, or if they did, they were not telling a human. Finally, in desperation, she went back to the garden. It was the only place connected to Zayden that she knew, the only piece of his world she had access to. She was standing by the fountain when she felt it, a presence behind her, cold and familiar. She turned, and Zayden was there, stepping through the gate. But he looked different. His face was haggard, and there were shadows under his eyes that had not been there before. His clothes were torn, and there was a wound on his neck that looked like it had been made by claws. "Zayden," she breathed, rushing to him. "What happened? How are you here?" "I escaped," he said roughly. "They were holding me in the council chambers beneath the old cathedral. I should not have been able to get out, but they underestimated how much I have changed, how much I was willing to lose to see you one more time." "They came here," Damaris said quickly. "Silviana and 2 others. They questioned me. They said someone accused you, said you were manipulating me. They're going to pass judgment tomorrow night." "I know who accused me." Zayden's voice was bitter. "Draven. Catalina's brother. He has hated me since her death, and rightly so. He wants me to pay for what I did to her, and I understand that. I would want the same in his position." "But you've changed," Damaris insisted. "You're not the same. He does not care if I have changed." "Bhakti," Zayden interrupted. "His sister is Ash. No amount of change will bring her back, and the council, they are right to question me. They are right to wonder if my transformation is real or simply a performance. I have given them no proof, only words, and words are cheap. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to accept their judgment, he said quietly. If they decide to end me, I will not fight. It is a fair price for what I did. No. Damaris grabbed his arms, desperate. No, that's not fair. You've spent 80 years trying to be better. You've changed. You deserve to live. Do I? He looked at her, and his eyes were full of centuries of pain. I destroyed an innocent woman, Damaris. I took her will, herself, everything that made her who she was. I did it because I wanted her, and I did not care what she wanted. And when she could not bear it anymore, she chose death over life with me. What punishment is sufficient for that? You've already been punished, Damaris said through tears. You've punished yourself for 80 years, and you've become someone who would never do that again. That has to count for something. Perhaps it does, but it does not erase what I did. I'm not asking you to erase it. I'm asking you to fight, to tell them the truth, to show them what I see in you. She held his face in her hands, feeling the coldness of his skin. Please, Zayden, please don't give up. He closed his eyes. What if I fight, and they still decide I am irredeemable? What if I survive, and you spend the rest of your life with someone the world sees as a monster? Then that's my choice to make, and I choose you. I choose you exactly as you are, past and present and future. But I can't choose anything if you're gone, so please, fight. For a long moment, he did not move. Then he opened his eyes and nodded slowly. I will try. I do not know if it will be enough, but I will try. For you. And for yourself, Damaris said. You deserve a future, Zayden. You've earned it. He kissed her forehead, a feather-light touch, and then he was gone, slipping back into the night. Damaris sank onto the stone bench and cried, hoping desperately that he would survive the night to come. The next evening, Damaris went to the old cathedral. She had found its location online after hours of searching, and though she did not know if she would be allowed in, she had to try. She had to be there for him. The cathedral was a Gothic monstrosity, all crumbling stone and stained glass. The door was locked, but when she pushed against it, it swung open as though it had been waiting for her. She stepped inside. The interior was vast and cold. The pews were gone, removed long ago, leaving only an empty stone floor. At the far end, beneath the broken rose window, a group of figures stood in a semicircle. All of them were pale, white-haired, dressed in dark clothing. Damaris recognized Silviana among them and the other two counselors from the garden. In the center of the semicircle stood Zayden. He saw her enter and shook his head slightly, a warning. But Damaris ignored it. She walked down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing, until she stood beside him. You were not summoned, human, Silviana said. I don't care, Damaris replied. If you're going to judge him, you're going to hear what I have to say first. We have already heard your testimony. It changes nothing. Then hear it again. Hear it from someone who knows him, who has seen him every night for 3 months, who has watched him fight to be better. Another voice spoke, rough and full of grief. You have watched him for 3 months. I watched my sister die over 200 years, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of her but a hollow shell. Tell me how 3 months of pretty words outweighs 2 centuries of torment. A man stepped forward from the shadows behind the council. He had Catalina's eyes, Damaris thought, the same shape and color, though his were full of rage where hers must once have been full of despair. This was Draven, then, the brother, the accuser. I'm not trying to outweigh what he did, Damaris said carefully. What he did to your sister was terrible, unforgivable maybe, but people can change, even vampires, even kings. He has not changed, Draven spat. He has simply found a new victim and dressed his predation in politeness. You think you chose him? You think you love him of your own free will? That is what my sister thought too, at first, before she realized that his power had seeped into her mind like poison until she could not tell her desires from his. That's not what happened with me, Damaris said. I know the difference. Do you? Did my sister? The question struck home. Damaris faltered, doubt creeping in for just a moment. How could she be certain? How could anyone be certain when faced with a creature who could reshape thoughts? Then she felt Zayden's hand brush hers, the lightest possible touch. And she remembered. She remembered every time he had asked, every time he had pulled back, every time he had chosen her comfort over his desire. "Yes," she said firmly, "I know the difference because he never tried to control me. He asked, every single time he asked. And sometimes I said no, and he respected it. He never pushed, never assumed, never acted like he was entitled to anything from me. That's not how predators behave." "It is how clever predators behave," Draven said. "My sister said no at first too. She refused him. But his power was subtle, relentless. Over time, her no became maybe, her maybe became yes, and her yes stopped meaning anything at all because she had forgotten how to refuse him. He did not force her in a moment. He eroded her over years. How do you know he is not doing the same to you?" "Because I'm still myself," Damaris said. "I still have opinions he doesn't like. I still make choices that frustrate him. I'm not an echo of what he wants. I'm my own person, and he treats me that way." "Catalina thought the same thing," Draven said, and his voice broke. "She told me she was happy. She told me she loved him. And by the time she realized the truth, it was too late. She was so entangled in his power that she could not see where she ended and he began. So she walked into the sunrise, because that was the only choice she had left that was truly her own." The silence that followed was terrible. Damaris looked at Zayden and saw the guilt written on every line of his face. He was not defending himself. He was not denying anything. He simply stood there, accepting the weight of Draven's words, accepting his own monstrous past. "You're right," Zayden said quietly. "Everything you say about what I did to your sister is true. I bound her with my power. I did not see her as a person with her own will. I saw her as something I wanted. And I took her. I called it love because I did not understand what love was. I thought wanting was the same as loving, and being wanted in return was the same as being loved. I did not realize I was destroying her until it was far too late." He turned to face the council fully, his shoulders squared. "I do not deny my crime. I do not ask you to forget what I did. I step down every day in my mind, over and over, from the throne I should never have had while I was who I was. But I am trying to be different now. I've spent 80 years learning to ask instead of take, learning to respect a no, learning to see the people around me as whole and separate, not as extensions of my will." "Trying is not the same as succeeding," Sylviana said. "And we cannot risk giving you power again if there is any chance you will revert to what you were." "I understand," Zayden said, "and I cannot prove to you that I have changed. I can only tell you that I have, and hope that it is enough. But if it is not, if you decide that I am too dangerous to live, then I accept that judgment. I will not fight. Catalina deserves at least that much justice." "No," Damaris said sharply. "No, that's not justice. Justice would be acknowledging that he spent 80 years atoning. Justice would be seeing that he's not the same person who hurt Catalina." "Justice," Draven said coldly, "would be my sister alive and whole. Since I cannot have that, I will settle for ensuring he never does to anyone else what he did to her." "He won't," Damaris insisted. "I know he won't. You cannot know. None of us can know, and that uncertainty is enough to condemn him." Sylviana raised a hand, calling for silence. "We have heard enough. The council will deliberate now. Zayden Vorodin, you will wait here for our judgment. The human may stay or go as she chooses." "I'm staying," Damaris said immediately. She moved closer to Zayden, taking his hand. His fingers were cold, but they closed around hers with desperate strength. The council withdrew to the shadows, their white heads bent together in conference. Draven remained where he was, watching Zayden with hate-filled eyes. The minutes stretched, each one feeling like an hour. Finally, Sylviana returned. Her face was grave. "We have reached a decision. Zayden Vorodin, you are guilty of the crimes you confessed. You violated Catalina Draven's will and autonomy. You bound her with your power and kept her prisoner in all but name. You drove her to take her own life. These facts are not in dispute." Damaris felt Zayden's hand tighten on hers. She squeezed back, trying to lend him strength. "However," Sylviana continued, "we must also consider what you have done since. You stepped down from power voluntarily. You exiled yourself. You have spent 8 decades learning to change your nature, which is no small feat for our kind, and you have not, to our knowledge, harmed anyone in those years. The question before us is whether a vampire can truly change, Lord Constantine added, whether the nature we are born with can be overcome or only suppressed temporarily. We are predators, Lady Mihaela said softly. We hunt, we feed, we dominate. These are our instincts. To ask one of us to be gentle is like asking a wolf to become a lamb. It is not in our nature. But nature is not destiny, Silviana said. We have laws, courts, codes of conduct. We have built a society on the idea that vampires can control our instincts, can choose civilization over savagery. If we believe that, then we must also believe that one vampire, given sufficient time and motivation, can change even deeper patterns, can learn to ask instead of take. She looked at Zayden, and her expression was unreadable. The council is divided. Some of us believe you have changed. Others believe you have simply learned to hide what you are. The human's testimony is compelling, but it is also the testimony of someone who may be under your influence, even if she does not realize it. I'm not under his influence, Damaris said desperately. Please, you have to believe me. We do not have to believe anything, Draven said. We have to decide if the risk is worth taking, and I say it is not. Kill him now, before he destroys another innocent. Or spare him now, Damaris countered, and show that your society actually believes in redemption, that you're not just predators playing at civilization. Silviana's eyes narrowed. You are bold, human, but boldness is not proof. Then what would be proof? Damaris demanded. What could he possibly do to prove he's changed? Nothing, Silviana said. There is nothing he can do because we cannot see inside his mind or heart. We can only observe his actions, and actions can be deceiving. So we are left with a choice: execute him as a precaution or spare him and hope we are not wrong. There is a third option, Zayden said suddenly. His voice was quiet but clear. Let me prove myself through action, not words. Reinstate me as king, but under supervision. Let the council watch me. Let them observe how I use power. If I revert to what I was, if I abuse my authority or harm anyone under my rule, then execute me then. Let my actions be the proof, not my promises. That is a dangerous gamble, Lord Constantine said. Yes, Zayden agreed, but it is a gamble that puts the consequences on me, not on your judgment. If I fail, I die. If I succeed, you have a king who understands the weight of his power and the importance of restraint. Either way, you will have your answer. Silviana studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to Draven. What say you, brother of Catalina? Do you accept these terms? Draven's face was a mask of fury and grief. I want him dead. I want him to pay for what he did to my sister, but... He stopped, swallowed hard. But Catalina asked me once, before the end, if I thought people could change. She asked if monsters could become something else. I told her no. And she said that was the saddest thing about the world, that we had given up on transformation. His voice shook. She believed in redemption, even when she could not find it for herself, so I will honor her belief, even though it guts me. I will accept his proposal. But if he fails, if he harms even one person the way he harmed her, I will kill him myself, and damn the council's judgment. Fair enough, Zayden said. I would expect nothing less. Silviana nodded slowly. Then it is decided. Zayden Vorodin, you are reinstated as king, under the supervision of this council. You will report to us monthly. You will be watched. And if you give us any reason to doubt your transformation, we will end you without hesitation. Do you accept these terms? I do, Zayden said. Then go. Return to your court. Rule wisely if you can. She looked at Damaris. And you, human, you've tied yourself to a vampire king. I hope for your sake that your faith in him is not misplaced. It's not, Damaris said. I know it's not. The council dispersed, melting into the shadows of the cathedral. Draven lingered for a moment, his eyes on Zayden. I will be watching, he said. Every moment, every decision. Do not make me regret this mercy. I will not, Zayden promised. And Draven, I am sorry. I know it means nothing, but I am sorry for what I did to your sister. I will carry that regret until the end of my existence. Draven said nothing. He simply turned and left. Damaris and Zayden stood alone in the empty cathedral. The silence was enormous, heavy with relief and fear and possibility. "You're alive," Damaris whispered. "You're going to be all right." "Because of you," Zayden said. He turned to her, and his eyes were wet. She had not known vampires could cry. "Because you believed in me when I could not believe in myself. Because you fought for me." "Of course I did. I love you. I love you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I love you, and I swear to you I will be worthy of that love. I will be the person you think I am. I will be the king I should have been all along." "You already are," Damaris said into his shoulder. "You just needed the chance to prove it." They held each other in the ruins of the old cathedral, two people from different worlds learning how to build a future together. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Zayden returned to his court, and Damaris discovered that being the partner of a vampire king was far more complicated than being the friend of an exiled one. There were politics to navigate, factions to manage, ancient grudges and alliances that predated her birth by centuries. Zayden moved through it all with a care and deliberation that would have been foreign to the king he once was. He asked counsel before making decisions. He listened to dissent. He ruled with a gentleness that surprised his subjects and frustrated some of them. But he did not waver. He held to the principles he had learned in exile, even when it would have been easier to slip back into old habits. Damaris watched him and fell more in love with him every day. She saw how hard he worked, how carefully he navigated the minefield of his own instincts. She saw him question himself, doubt himself, force himself to pause and consider before acting. It was not effortless for him. It was a constant, conscious choice, and that made it all the more meaningful. She continued to tend the garden because it had become her sanctuary as much as his, but now Zayden joined her there most nights, and they worked side by side, coaxing life from the soil. It was in the garden that they learned each other, slowly and carefully, with the kind of patience that came from knowing they had time. One evening in early spring, as the bulbs they had planted in autumn began to push through the earth, Damaris found Zayden waiting for her at the gate. He was holding a single white rose, its petals perfect and luminous in the moonlight. "I wanted to ask you something," he said as she approached. His voice was tentative, uncertain in a way that made her heart ache. "And I know I have asked you many things already. I've asked for your time, your patience, your faith, but I want to ask for something more. And I need you to know that you can say no. You can always say no." "What do you want to ask?" Damaris said softly. "I want to ask if I can kiss you." He offered her the rose, his hand shaking slightly. "I have wanted to kiss you since the night I told you I loved you. I have wanted it so badly that it is a physical ache. But I could not ask until I knew, until I was certain that I could bear it if you refused, that I would not push or persuade or use any of the power I have to influence your answer. I needed to know that I could offer you a true choice, with no consequences if you chose no." Damaris took the rose, her fingers brushing his. "And now you're certain." "Now I know that I would rather spend eternity wanting you than one moment having you without your wholehearted consent. So I'm asking, may I kiss you, Damaris Olwen? May I hold you and touch you and show you with my body what my words cannot express? And if the answer is no, or not yet, or maybe someday but not now, I will accept it and wait as long as you need me to wait." Tears blurred Damaris's vision. This was what love looked like, she thought. Not possession or passion or the desperate need to consume another person. Love looked like a vampire king trembling at a garden gate, offering a choice and meaning it with every fiber of his being. "Yes," she said. "Yes. You can kiss me." He moved so carefully, as though she were made of glass. His hands cupped her face, cold against her warm skin, and he paused there, giving her time to change her mind. When she did not pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It was the gentlest kiss she had ever received. It was also the most passionate, because she could feel the restraint behind it, the tremendous effort it took for him to be soft when his nature screamed at him to take and claim and possess. But he held himself back, kissing her like she was precious, like she was a gift he had not earned but was grateful to receive. When they finally parted, they were both shaking. "Thank you," Zayden whispered. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for teaching me how to be worthy of trust." "Thank you for asking," Damaris said. "Thank you for showing me what it means to be truly seen and valued." They stood at the garden gate, foreheads pressed together, and Damaris felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was where she was meant to be. This was who she was meant to be with. A man who had been a monster and learned to be something better. A king who ruled with care instead of cruelty. A vampire who asked for permission before taking what he wanted. He was not perfect. Neither was she. But they were perfect for each other. Two broken people learning to grow toward the light. 6 months later, the garden was in full bloom. Roses climbed the walls, lavender perfumed the air, and the herb beds overflowed with green life. Damaris had expanded her work, planting new sections and coaxing rare flowers from the soil. The garden had become famous in the vampire court, a symbol of what could grow when given care and patience. Zayden's rule was similarly flourishing. He had faced challenges, certainly old enemies who tested his resolve, factions who wanted him to return to the iron-fisted leadership of his past. But he had held firm. He had asked questions instead of issuing commands. He had listened instead of demanding obedience. And slowly, grudgingly, his subjects had come to respect this new kind of king. Draven came to the garden sometimes, watching from outside the gate. Damaris noticed him there one evening and invited him in. He hesitated, but eventually he followed her through the gate. "This was Catalina's favorite place," he said quietly, looking around at the flowers. "Before, when she still had a self that could have favorites." "I'm sorry," Damaris said. "I know that doesn't help, but I'm sorry for what she suffered." "He has changed," Draven said abruptly. "I did not want to believe it. I wanted him to fail so I could have my revenge, but he has not failed. He rules justly, he asks permission, he respects boundaries. It guts me to admit it, but he is not the vampire who destroyed my sister." "No," Damaris agreed, "he's not, but he remembers being that vampire, and that memory keeps him careful." "Does he?" Draven stopped, started again. "Does he speak of her?" "Sometimes. He honors her memory. He learned from what he did to her. She changed him, even if she did not live to see it." "That is something, I suppose." Draven looked at her. "You love him." "I do. And he loves you without compulsion. I've watched closely. I've seen no sign that he uses his power on you. He doesn't. He wouldn't. It would destroy him if he did." Draven nodded slowly. "Then perhaps there is such a thing as redemption after all. Perhaps my sister did not die for nothing if her death taught him how to love properly." He left after that, but he returned sometimes, drawn by the memory of his sister and the evidence that her suffering had, in some small way, mattered. It did not erase his grief, but it gave it meaning, and meaning was better than emptiness. 1 year after their first kiss, Zayden led Damaris to the garden gate at midnight. The moon was full overhead, and the flowers glowed in its light. He had been acting strange all evening, nervous and distracted, and Damaris had been trying to figure out what was wrong. "I have something to ask you," Zayden said when they reached the gate. "Another question. The most important question I have ever asked." "All right," Damaris said, her heart beginning to race. "A year ago, I stood here and asked if I could kiss you. It was the first time I had asked for something I wanted without knowing if I would receive it. You said yes, and that yes changed my existence. It proved to me that I could ask for things without demanding them, that I could want without taking." He took her hands in his. "I want to ask you something else now, something bigger. And I need you to know that no is an acceptable answer, that I will not love you any less if you refuse. That this is a true question, not a demand wrapped in politeness. Zayden, will you marry me?" The words came out in a rush. "Will you bind your life to mine as much as a mortal can bind to an immortal? Will you let me love you, honor you, cherish you for as long as you live? I know it is not fair to ask. I know I will have you for only a fraction of my existence, that I will lose you the way I have lost everyone I have ever cared for. But I want whatever time you can give me. I want to stand beside you as your partner, your husband, your choice." Damaris felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course, yes." He pulled a ring from his pocket, something old and beautiful, a silver band set with a stone that caught the moonlight and reflected it back in rainbow shards. He slid it onto her finger, his hands shaking. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you would say no. Afraid I was asking too much." "You're not asking too much. You're asking exactly the right amount." She pulled him down into a kiss, and this one was not gentle at all. It was fierce and joyful and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "I have one more question," Damaris said, suddenly shy. "One I want to ask you." "Anything," Zayden said. "May I stay the day with you? In your home, I mean. I want to see where you go when the sun rises. I want to know all of you, not just the parts that exist at night." Zayden froze. For a moment, she thought she had overstepped, asked for something he could not give. Then he said, very quietly, "You want to see me vulnerable. You want to see me helpless." "I want to see you," Damaris corrected. "All of you, the powerful and the vulnerable, both." "I sleep like the dead," he said. "I am completely unaware, completely defenseless. If you wanted to harm me, you could, easily. I don't want to harm you. I want to be with you in every way, at every time. But if you're not comfortable with that, I understand." He studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Yes, you may stay. You may see me as I am when the sun rises. I trust you, Damaris. I trust you with my life." They went to his home, a beautiful old manor house on the outskirts of the city. He showed her the room where he slept, a chamber with blackout curtains and a bed that looked like it belonged in a museum. As dawn approached, she saw him begin to slow, his movements becoming sluggish, his eyes heavy. "It is not a restful sleep," he said as he lay down. "It is like death. I will not wake for anything until the sun sets again. If something happened, if there were a fire or an emergency, I would not know. I would burn or drown or be murdered, and I would never know." "I'll keep you safe," Damaris promised. She lay down beside him, curling against his cold body. "Will you be here when I wake?" he asked. "I'll be here." "Thank you." His eyes drifted closed. "Thank you for choosing me, Damaris. Thank you for teaching me that love is something freely given, not taken. Thank you for being patient while I learned." "Thank you for learning," she whispered, but he was already gone, his body still and lifeless beside hers. She watched over him through the day, reading and dozing and thinking about the future they would build together. When evening came and his eyes opened, the first thing he saw was her face. "You stayed," he said wonderingly. "I told you I would." "I know, but I still feared." He stopped, shook his head. "I'm still learning to trust that good things can remain good, that love does not always end in loss." "It won't," Damaris said. "Not for a long time. I'm not going anywhere." They were married a month later in the garden under the spring moon. The ceremony was attended by vampires and humans both, a blending of worlds that would have been impossible before. Draven stood as a witness, his presence a benediction and a warning both. Remember what love should not be, so you can be certain of what it is. Zayden spoke his vows with a king's authority and a penitent's humility. "I vow to ask before assuming," he said, "to listen before speaking, to honor your will as sacred, your choice as paramount. I vow to be gentle when my nature is not, to be patient when I want to rush, to be worthy of the trust you have placed in me. I love you, Damaris Olwen. I will love you until your last breath and beyond, and I will spend every day of your life trying to deserve you." Damaris spoke hers with a nurse's practicality and a gardener's faith. "I vow to see you as you are, not as you were or as you fear you might become," she said. "To trust the work you have done on yourself, to believe in your capacity for change. I vow to be honest with you, even when honesty is hard, to say no when I mean no, and yes when I mean yes, so you always know where you stand with me. I love you, Zayden Vorodin. I will love you for all the time I have, and I will spend every day of my life helping you tend the garden you have grown in yourself." When they kissed, the garden seemed to bloom brighter, as though the flowers approved. Years passed. Damaris continued to age, her dark hair gaining silver threads, her face gathering the lines of a life well lived. Zayden remained as he was, unchanging, eternal. It should have been a source of pain, the knowledge that she would grow old while he stayed young. But instead, they found it clarifying. Every day was precious because they knew it was numbered. Every moment mattered because there would not be infinite moments. They built a life together that was as much human as vampire. Damaris opened a charity that brought garden therapy to those recovering from burnout and trauma, sharing the healing she had found. Zayden ruled his court with increasing confidence, his gentle leadership becoming the new standard. Together, they proved that different worlds could intertwine, that love could bridge impossible gaps. Draven became an unexpected friend, joining them sometimes for quiet evenings in the garden. He never fully forgave Zayden. Forgiveness, they all agreed, was perhaps too much to ask. But he found a kind of peace in seeing that his sister's death had meant something, had changed something, that the monster who had destroyed her had become someone who would never destroy again. On Damaris's 40th birthday, Zayden met her at the garden gate with a troubled expression. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Something I have been thinking about for years now." "What is it?" "I can give you immortality, the vampire's gift. I could turn you, make you like me, so that we could have forever instead of just a lifetime." Damaris's breath caught. She had known this was possible, of course, but she had not expected him to offer it. "I am asking," Zayden continued, "not telling. I want you to understand that. If you say no, we continue as we are. I will love you until you die of old age, and then I will mourn you, and eventually I will learn to go on. That is acceptable to me. Painful, but acceptable." "But," Damaris prompted, "but if you want forever, if you want to stay with me beyond mortal years, I can give you that. I can turn you. It would be your choice, made freely, with full understanding of what you are choosing. Not like—" He stopped, swallowed. "Not like Catalina, not like someone bound by power into a choice that was not really a choice. You would choose with your whole self, knowing the consequences, and I would honor that choice, whatever it is." Damaris thought about immortality, about endless nights, eternal youth, the slow accumulation of centuries. She thought about watching the world change, about the weight of time. She thought about staying beside Zayden, learning the fullness of his existence, being his partner not just for a human lifetime, but for as long as they both endured. "I want to say yes," she said slowly, "but I want to wait. I want to live a full human life first. I want to age, to know what it is to be mortal all the way through. And then, when I am old and ready, when I have lived enough human years to feel complete, then ask me again. And if you change your mind, if you decide you do not want immortality after all, then I'll tell you, and you'll accept it." She touched his face. "That's what asking means, right? Accepting the answer, whatever it is." "Yes," Zayden said. "That is exactly what it means." "Then ask me again when I'm 80, if I make it that far, and I'll give you my answer then." He nodded, and they sat together in the garden, watching the moon rise over the roses. The years continued to pass. Damaris grew older, and Zayden loved her through every stage. The silver in her hair, the aches in her joints, the way her hands grew gnarled from decades of garden work. He loved her when she was vibrant and when she was tired, when she was sharp and when she was forgetful. He loved her unconditionally, which meant he loved her exactly as she was in each moment, not as she had been or as he wished she would be. When Damaris turned 80, Zayden found her in the garden as he had done so many times before. She was moving slowly now, carefully, but she still tended the flowers with the same devotion she had brought 40 years earlier. "I have a question to ask you," he said, and his voice shook. Damaris turned to him, a smile on her weathered face. "I know, and I have an answer ready. You do not even know what I am going to ask." "Yes, I do. You're going to ask if I want to be turned, if I want immortality." She took his hand. "And my answer is yes. I've lived a full human life. I have seen my friends grow old alongside me. I have known mortality, carried it in my bones, understood its weight and its beauty, and now I am ready to set it down. I'm ready to walk beside you into forever." "Are you certain?" Zayden asked. "It is irreversible. Once done, there is no going back." "I'm certain. I've never been more certain of anything." "Then I will do it. But I want you to understand. I will ask your permission every step of the way. I will not take your blood unless you tell me to. I will not give you mine unless you ask for it. Even in this, even in transformation, your consent is everything." "I know," Damaris said. "That's why I trust you." The turning was a ritual, and careful and deliberate. Zayden asked before each step, and Damaris gave her permission clearly, her voice steady. When it was done, when her heart stopped, and then started again with vampire slowness, when her eyes opened to a world suddenly sharper and more vivid, she felt no regret, only certainty. "How do you feel?" Zayden asked anxiously. "Like myself," Damaris said, "just more so." They returned to the garden together, both of them moving with vampire grace now. Damaris saw the flowers with new eyes, saw colors she had never perceived as human. She smelled the layered richness of the soil, heard the whisper of insects moving through the undergrowth. The world had become a symphony of sensation, and she was grateful for every note. "Thank you," she said to Zayden. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for asking. Thank you for giving me the choice." "Thank you for choosing me," he said. "Thank you for choosing this life, this existence, this forever." They kissed at the garden gate, under the moon they would now share for centuries to come. Around them, the roses bloomed, tended by love and care, and the patient work of two people who had learned that the most powerful force in the universe was not power at all. It was permission, it was choice, it was the quiet courage of asking, "May I?" and meaning it with your whole heart. And it was the grace of answering, freely and without coercion, "Yes, you may, you always may." Years turned into decades, decades into centuries. Damaris and Zayden ruled the vampire court together, two people who understood the difference between power and authority, between commanding and leading. They made mistakes, as all rulers do, but they learned from them. They asked questions when others demanded answers. They listened when it would have been easier to simply decide. The garden continued to grow, tended by their hands through generation after generation of flowers. It became a legend among vampires, a place where the king who learned to ask had first met the human who taught him how. Young vampires came there to see it, to hear the story, to understand that their nature did not have to define them, that they could choose to be something other than predators if they were willing to do the work. Draven, who had thought he would outlive his grief, instead outlived it into something else, a bittersweet acceptance. He saw his sister's legacy in every question Zayden asked, in every boundary he respected. Catalina had not died for nothing. She had died so that one vampire might learn the cost of taking without asking, and in learning might save countless others from the same fate. And at the garden gate, where it had all begun, Damaris and Zayden stood together under the moon and the stars, their hands entwined. The gate was always open now. Anyone could enter. But still, people asked permission before crossing the threshold, because the garden had taught them that asking was not weakness. It was the highest form of respect. It was the truest form of love. "Do you ever regret it?" Damaris asked one night, when they had been together for 300 years. "Giving up the king you were to become the king you are?" "Never," Zayden said. "That king was powerful, but he was hollow. This king, the one who asks, who listens, who loves with his whole being, he is real. And he exists because you believed in him before he existed. You would have become him anyway," Damaris said. "You were already on that path when we met." "Perhaps, but you made the path easier. You made it possible to believe that change was worth the effort." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers in the way that had become their signature gesture. "You saved me, Damaris. Not from death, but from becoming something I could not live with being." "We saved each other," she corrected. "You saved me from burnout and hollowness. I saved you from your own worst instincts. That's what love is, I think. Mutual salvation." "Then I am grateful for it," Zayden said. "For you. For this life we have built together. For every moment, every question, every choice freely made." They stood at the gate as they had stood so many times before, two beings who had learned that the greatest strength was not in taking but in asking, not in possessing but in cherishing, not in controlling but in trusting. And in the garden behind them, the roses bloomed eternal, fed by love and patience and the revolutionary act of treating consent as sacred. The story spread beyond the vampire courts into the wider world of supernatural beings. Other kings heard of the vampire who asked permission, and some laughed, thinking him weak. But others listened and wondered, and slowly began to change their own ways. The ripple effect of one question, "May I?" spread outward, transforming courts and councils and ancient power structures that had stood unchanged for millennia. Damaris built schools in the mortal world and the vampire one, teaching the principles she had learned in the garden, that growth requires patience, that life responds to care, that the strongest foundations are built on respect. She trained gardeners who understood that their work was not just about plants, but about philosophy, about demonstrating that nurturing was more powerful than dominating. And always, always, she returned to the garden, to the gate where Zayden had first asked if he could kiss her, to the place where everything had changed because one vampire chose to ask instead of take, and one human chose to trust that the asking was real. They grew old together in the way immortals do, not in body, but in wisdom, in understanding, in the deep knowledge that comes from centuries of loving the same person through joy and sorrow and everything in between. They became legends, then myths, then foundational stories that every young vampire learned when they came of age. And at the heart of every telling was the same truth, that the vampire king who learned to ask permission had saved not just himself, but his entire species, that he had shown them a different way to be powerful, a different way to love, a different way to exist in a world that had always told them they were monsters. He had asked, "May I?" And in asking, he had become more than a monster. He had become someone worthy of a yes. The garden still stands, centuries after this story took place. The gate is never locked. The flowers bloom in every season, tended by invisible hands, protected by ancient magic and the promise of two people who loved each other enough to change the world. And sometimes, on moonlit nights, visitors to the garden swear they can see two figures standing at the gate, one with white hair and pale skin, regal and proud, the other with eyes that hold centuries of kindness. The figures seem to be asking each other something, their heads bent together, their hands clasped, and then, always, they smile. And the smile says, yes, 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 in every language that has ever existed. Yes to asking, yes to choosing, yes to loving with respect and care, and the revolutionary understanding that consent is not an obstacle to passion, but its foundation. Yes to the garden, to the gate, to the question that changed everything. May I? You may. You always may. And in that exchange, that simple, profound exchange, lies the secret to every lasting love, every true partnership, every relationship built on bedrock instead of sand. Ask, mean it. Wait for the answer. Honor it. And when someone asks you, when they stand vulnerable and uncertain at your gate, answer honestly. Answer freely. Answer with your whole heart. Because that is how gardens grow. That is how love endures. That is how monsters become men and men become something more than either. That is how two people, against all odds and all logic, build a forever that actually feels like one. At the gate, in the garden under the moon, with a question and an answer, and the endless blooming of flowers that represent every choice made freely, every boundary respected, every love given and received without coercion. May I? Yes. Forever and always, yes.